Hi, this is János, it's Real World Audio, and today I'm answering a Darling amplifier question. And unfortunately, I cannot find Anil's comment, but from my top of my head, I tried to answer and remember what he asked. Sadly, YouTube is sometimes not the best to track comments in these cases when I have already thousands of comments coming in. And so anyway, coming back to the question, for those of you who don't know what is a Darling amplifier, it is a Flea-power vacuum tube amplifier that I have shared the plans on this channel, how to build it. I have given several levels of executions for it, and the one that is the most economical to build is, I called it the baby darling, and the one that's really pimped out version is the pure darling. And basically you can take it anywhere between the two of them. So if you have some part selections, like you flip it between baby darling, pure darling, or you have your own choices, don't worry about that, you can do it, and you will have a very happy result with it. These are just two, I would say, not extremes, because even the baby darling is a very high level amplifier, the likes that you do not really see in commercial field, or when you see them, they come at a price cost that you decide to buy a car instead of spending that money on an amplifier. So anyway, coming back to this amplifier build, what's the drawback? There's always a catch, and the catch in the Darling's case is that it's a Flea-power amplifier, less than 1 watt, 0.75 watt. So Anil was asking me, is there a way to have more output from them? Can he parallel the output tubes to get double the power? And my answer is yes. You can parallel the output tubes, so it means that when you read the schematics, instead of using one 1626 tube for the output, you use two in parallel, and basically you just need to double up those parts that are used there, and just connect the two tubes to the output coming from the input tube instead of connecting a single tube, and then you connect both plates to the output transformer. And the only change for the output transformer is that now the load, the primary impedance of the output transformer, is 1/2 compared to what you used for one tube only. So if you are using two tubes for the output, then I recommend a primary impedance of somewhere between 4 and 5 kilo ohms. So 4 to 5K will be very well suitable for this amplifier. And then you will be able to get 1.5 watts per channel from this little amplifier, and that's well, double the power compared to 0.75 watts. So you are going to get 3 dB more, and for some of you or many of you, this might be enough to push it beyond the boundary where you want to think about it. And you can parallel them even more massively. You can add 3 or 4. There was a Darling build where they put 5 tubes per channel, so like 10 power tubes total, and that gives a crazy 4 watts per channel. But in the Audio Fest where they compared those amps, yeah, that played the loudest, but people didn't like that the most by far. So the more tubes you use in parallel, the more you lose the edge, the magic of using such a super low power tube. Going for two tubes, it's a quite a good compromise. But why did I give you the one tube version only for 0.75 watts because because when I built originally my Darling amplifier, I built the two tube version, but if I were to build it now with the knowledge that I have since during the past 20 years, I would definitively not go for the two tube, I would go for one tube only. And because that has much more of that character that the two tubes already have. And if your loudspeakers are not are friendly enough to be happy with 1.5 watts, they will be happy with 0.75 watts as well. And if they are not happy with 1.5 watts, then even doubling the even having that 1.5 watts, the double version will not be so satisfactory. Nevertheless, it is for you to try it out. And for example, if you can build it even in a way that you can switch between using one tube or two tube per channel for the output. So you can switch between 0.75 watts or 1.5 watts output per channel. That would be a longer discussion how to do that, but I think that that might be a nice way, so that you, when you want a really nice quiet listening experience, you just engage one power tube, and when you want to go just a little bit more, play louder, but then you can engage both. So I will draw up the schematics for that, and what does it entail to build it like that way. I did not want to present it in that fashion in the original build, because that just gives a lot of layers of complexity, and if you have not built an amplifier yet, odds are that it will just make your life so much more complicated and so much more frustrating. But if you are an experienced tool builder already, then that's a pretty good idea. Yeah, so I think that that's the most about what you can do when you double up the tubes, but there's a lot more considerations to say. That when you double up the tubes, then you just double up the power output of the amplifier. But if your power supply stays the same, then the dynamic ability and the transient ability of your amplifier will not increase. So you are getting double the number to slap onto the specification sheet, but you are getting less, because the power stage, because now you have double the tubes, it's drawing double the quiescent current. And quiescent current means that current that the amplifier is using at all times and doing nothing with it. It's just to keep the tubes running at a point to be operating. It's kind of like when you have workers, then you need to house the workers and feed them. And even if they don't do anything, you still have to provide housing and feeding costs. And if you have like double the number of power tubes, it's kind of like doubling the number of workers. So it means that you are paying double the wages and double the housing expenses and double the food you feed to the workers, even when they are doing nothing. So it's like a massive doubling of the budget. And 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 when you are listening to music, 99.9% of the music will be able to be taken care of by one worker, if we use that worker analogy from the workers. If when we use vacuum tubes, so most of the music will be like under that 0.75 watts. The 1.5 watts will just give you a very, very little duty cycle when you get the advantage of those workers. So most of the money you are paying for in terms of power supply reserves is waste. You are wasting it from your account. So it means that if you double up the tubes, you should also double up the power supply reserves to keep pace with the increased cost of living. So what does this flowery language mean? So it means that your power supply can supply a certain amount of energy for the output tubes, and that energy, when there's a transient coming, can be drawn from the power supply. However, when you are, and then let's see, in the case of the Darling amp, so the tubes are drawing 20 milliamp per tube. That's what the 1626 power tube draws, 20 milliamps quiescent current when it does nothing. And then you have, of course, 1 tube per channel. That's 40 milliamps drawn total for your power stage, plus the input stage is drawing about 6 to 8 milliamps. Let's call it 6 milliamps. So you have a total of 46 milliamp consumption of your high voltage that the power supply is putting out. Now, if you double the number of power tubes, then you add 40 MA to that number. So now we are talking about 86 milliamps drawn just to keep it turned on. So it means that 40 milliamps of the power supply that is available for you, that was available for you with single channel as an instantaneous peak, now it's gone. So even when there's that big drum, whoosh, even though you have twice the number of tubes, twice the power to make that whoosh bigger, to make the drum sound louder, but it will sound slower because the power supply has less energy, quite a bit less energy to feed an instantaneous signal. And when talking about, I was talking now about milliamps. So what is the number of milliamps that you can notice that if you have that less current draw, you can hear it in the sound? So in the case of my Darling amplifier, which is now a really modified Darling amp, but it has 1.2 watts per channel output. So we are talking about this ballpark. And what I did is that I have bleeder resistors that bleed the DC when you turn off the amp, and I put a switch on the bleeder resistor so that I can engage it or disengage it. And that bleeder resistor draws 1 milliamps of current from the power supply, just 1. And when I turn it off, I can hear it, that the transient response becomes significantly better. Now imagine that you can hear, that's what 1 milliamp does, already makes a significant improvement in the intricacies, in the transient response of the amplifier. Now, taking away 40, that's absolutely gargantuan. So that's why don't just go blindly for the numbers, and bigger output by itself, it does not mean you will have a better amplifier. You will have an amplifier that plays louder, not that much louder, 3 dB louder. It's not so much less than what you would think. But what we lose, because we have to feed the extra power tube, is you lose 80% of the intricate ability of the driver. So you are turning a race horse, if you think about horses, into like a policeman's horse. all horses are fine, but if you want them to run wild like a Mustang in the prairie, it won't run like a Mustang in the prairie anymore. So that's the thing. You can make it have more power, and if you are apping the tubes in parallel more and more, like using 3 tubes, 4 tubes, then you are just stacking up the milliamps that you are drawing from the power supply, and it's becoming slower and slower and slower. Also, the power tubes, you have to match them very carefully, because if there's a mismatch between them, they're going to smear the output signal, and you're going to lose even more of the intricate details. How much is that smearing? Well, I still have my original Darling amp that has 2 tubes per channel. One day I will dig it out. It requires already recapping. I will recap it and fire it up. Compare it to the ones that use only 1 tube per channel, and I think I can share more on that experience, more with you. But at this point, I would really prefer to recommend the single power tube per channel. And if you are going to be happy with 1.5 watt, then I would say the 0.75 watt will make you just as happy. And if neither makes you happy, then you need to go like for 10 watts or more. So it's kind of hard to express, hard to say. You have to experience it, and what people experience and say, that it's like, this is not enough 1 watt. I can't believe it. It sounds much more than that, and that's because the vast majority of music that we listen to is just on the milliwatt scale. Then only the loud bits and transients require more watts. And here, in this case, if there's a really big transient, of course you don't have the required watts for that, but what you have is the speed. So for the transient, you will still get the speed for that transient, even though that will get compression on it if you want to push it beyond the power limitation. But the compression in the case of a triode amplifier always shows up as if the amplifier is getting louder, and more powerful. So that's what you will notice, is that when you want to play it louder and louder, it will suddenly start like more and more powerful, and then if you push it even more, and then it will just get distorted. But before it poops out, instead of becoming shrill and eating your eardrums, it will just sound, wow, this has so much juice and grunt in it. And some of you don't like that because you think that's an alteration from the original source, and that's totally okay. There's all sorts of different tastes and what we listen to in music, and how we listen to sound, but this is an amplifier to reveal the intricacies in music, and not for the boom and the and why is it so special? Because I think this is a unique opportunity that for very little money you can have a taste what intricate music reproduction is. And I would say that this is a perfect starter amplifier if you are curious about building amplifiers. And it's not just a starter amplifier. You start building it, and then you spend 20 years playing around, going for higher power, doing all sorts of stuff, and at the end of 20 years you will come back to the exact same amplifier and just build it with higher parts quality. And you will notice that this is at the quiet listening level, this is an ultimate amplifier. And the only limitation to it is your skill and your execution. And if you can execute it at a very high level, you have something that you will love so much that there is not an amplifier in the world that you would rather have than this for quiet listening. You will even prefer it to an ongaku level amplifier, or name your favorite mega expensive amplifier. You will prefer the Darling amp for quiet listening. And of course, if you want to rock out, you need something else, but something that can play really well, really loud. You turn it down to the level of the Darling, and you notice that the Darling eats it for yummy, yummy breakfast. Okay, so thank you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Annie, for your question. Bye bye.